6 years after the divorce, my ex-wife suddenly said she regretted it. She regretted having an affair back then and betraying our marriage. Probably because she saw me alone and thought I still loved her as deeply as I did back then. Even though she had an affair and divorced me, she thought I would keep waiting for her to come back. She would never have imagined that I was already married, and my child was even 3 years old. Emma chose to come clean with me because she found out she was pregnant. The gestational sac on the ultrasound report was at 8 weeks plus, and I had just returned after being on a business trip for over 3 months. Naturally, the child wasn't mine. Emma sat opposite me with a cold attitude. She confessed to me that she had the affair half a year ago. She refused to say who her lover was, only saying that now that she was pregnant, she wanted to keep the child and give her lover a proper status. Of course, that meant we had to get a divorce. I once suspected that I had misheard. How could I not believe that I had been cuckolded for half a year? But before I could ask, Emma seemed to have anticipated what I was going to say. Looking into my eyes expressionlessly, she told me, "You heard me right." I stared blankly at this woman whom I had loved for 5 years. My heart felt as if it had been pricked by needles, and the dense pain spread. For a moment, I felt like I could hardly stand steady. I had never imagined that there would be problems in my marriage. Emma was very beautiful, but she had a cold personality and was slow to warm up to people. In school, she was a well-known cold goddess. There were many boys who liked her, and it took me 2 years of persistent pursuit to finally win her heart. I really liked her. After being together for so many years, even though she had never said she loved me or anything like that, I had taken it for granted that she was used to my presence. Not long after graduating from university, we got married. 3 years of dating and 2 years of marriage, only 5 years together, and she had an affair? I couldn't accept this fact at once, and I even went crazy trying to find a reason for her infidelity. I wanted to say that I couldn't live without her and that I couldn't accept a divorce from her. But when the words reached my lips, looking at Emma's cold face, I suddenly stopped. Asking myself, even if the unfaithful Emma agreed to return to the family and continue living with me, would I still be willing? I wasn't willing. Of course I wasn't willing. Emma had an affair, she was carrying someone else's child, and she was dirty. Too dirty. She no longer deserved to be with me. After getting along for so many years, Emma still didn't know me well enough. She only knew how much I loved her. Perhaps because of this, probably afraid of my entanglement, after saying she wanted a divorce, she made a phone call and rushed out with the keys in a hurry, leaving me alone to deal with it. She didn't come back until the next morning. I stood on the balcony and felt the cool breeze all night. I thought about it all night, but I still couldn't figure out why Emma had an affair. Emma came from a fairly good family. She was the only daughter in her family. After graduating, she started taking over the family business that was gradually declining. Because of this, she had been so busy in the past 2 years that she hardly had any time to rest. Working during the day and having social engagements at night had become her normal work routine. I couldn't figure it out. How could she still find the time to have an affair when she was so busy? Maybe it was because I was also busy with my work, traveling all over the place to negotiate business, and I didn't spend enough time with her. But this still couldn't be a reason for her infidelity. When Emma came back, she stood in the entrance hall and quietly looked at me, or rather, at the floor full of cigarette butts at my feet. There was no change in her expression. She didn't feel at all the blow her infidelity had caused me. I looked at her across the living room. Her glamour and my embarrassment formed a sharp contrast. I began to reflect on why I was punishing myself for her mistake. I don't know how long it had passed, but I heard Emma ask, "Have you figured it out?" Have I figured it out? Looking back on these 5 years together, when we occasionally had arguments, no matter who was at fault, I was always the first to compromise. She had never once bowed her head. Not even once. I sneered, stepped on the cigarette butt on the ground and crushed it, selectively ignoring the numb pain coming from my leg bones. I just raised my chin and asked Emma, why? Why did she have an affair? We had known each other for 7 years and been together for 5 years. Last night, I had imagined countless reasons why Emma would tell me she wanted a divorce. As long as it wasn't an affair, would consider forgiving her for any other reason. But it just so happened that she had an affair. And infidelity was the only thing that couldn't be forgiven. Emma indifferently averted her eyes, with a hint of impatience between her eyebrows and eyes. There's no reason. James, our relationship has come to an end. Isn't it better for us to part on good terms? What a saying that our relationship has come to an end and we should part on good terms. Fine, I forced a smile and pulled the corners of my mouth. Let's get a divorce. Perhaps because I agreed too readily, which was inconsistent with my past image of being a love-struck fool. Emma stared at me in surprise for a moment. She moved her lips but didn't say anything in the end. Because I agreed, the divorce process went very smoothly. We didn't even inform our parents on both sides and quickly got the divorce certificate, just as hastily as when we got the marriage certificate. Regarding the joint property of the husband and wife, I naturally argued my case. The property that belonged to me couldn't be given to Emma and her lover for nothing. Emma didn't want to make concessions, but she was the one at fault in the marriage, and her connections in City H were far inferior to mine. She simply couldn't compete with me. In the end, she had to give up most of the savings and only begged me to leave the house to her. Biting her lower lip, she seemed a bit humiliated. James, you earn more than I do. I still have to raise the child in the future. At least I need to have a house. I sneered. What about your lover? Can't he even give you a house? Judging by Emma's expression, I probably hit the nail on the head. The house was our wedding house. Both our families had contributed when we bought it. I estimated the savings and thought it was meaningless to keep arguing, so I finally agreed to leave the house to her, but she still had to make concessions regarding our savings. Emma looked at me as if she didn't recognize me. Of course, she didn't recognize me when I no longer loved her. After 2 years of marriage, I didn't have too many belongings. I picked up my luggage and left without looking back even once. Emma didn't seem sad at all. Because of this, I suddenly wanted to see the man she had an affair with. How good was that man that he had made Emma do the thing she despised the most in her life? In the end, I held back and didn't go to see him. Since we were already divorced, not disturbing each other was the best way to respect our past relationship. The day after the divorce, I received a WeChat message from Emma's cousin. She asked me who the boy was that had gone home with her cousin. There were 3 expressions of covering the mouth and giggling after this sentence. I stared at that line of words for a long time and finally felt relieved. I replied indifferently, "You should ask your cousin this question." After replying to this WeChat message, I deleted Luna's WeChat contact on a whim. Luna had always disliked me. Sending this WeChat message was just to make me feel uncomfortable on purpose. How could I let her have her way? People came and went on the long street. I stood in the crowd, as if I couldn't find my way home. At this moment, I realized that maybe it was time to leave this city. The next day, I submitted my resignation letter to the company. After working hard in this city for many years, I had already established a position in the company, but I suddenly didn't want to stay here anymore. I had come to this city for Emma, and now I was leaving because of her. Thinking carefully, in the short youthful years of my first half of life, I had almost always revolved around Emma. TSK. No wonder she got bored. After resigning from my job, I visited several scenic spots in this city and spent a month before preparing to head to my destination. 2 hours before I was about to board the plane after packing my luggage, Emma suddenly called me. More than a month after the divorce, we had completely cut off contact. There was no way we would contact each other again, let alone Emma taking the initiative to call. I hesitated for a moment but still answered the phone. "Hello?" Emma's plain voice came through the phone. "I heard you're planning to leave City H?" I mocked. "Your news travels fast." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. After a long time, Emma coldly said, "Do as you like." After saying that, she hung up the phone. To be honest, if Emma had spoken to me in this tone before, I would have already prepared the gift she liked and stood downstairs of her company, eagerly begging for her forgiveness. Times have changed. Today is not the same as before. Emma surely doesn't still think that I will indulge her temper like I used to, does she? Ridiculous. I stared expressionlessly at my phone for a while. Before leaving, I went to the nearby business hall and cancelled my phone number. In the future, I don't want to have any more contact with Emma. I was born in a small county town. The development here is relatively slow, and life is not as fast-paced as in many cities. The moment my grandmother, who is over 80 years old, saw me, she tightly grasped my hand. She looked at me over and over again and kept scolding me for not eating properly and having lost a lot of weight. I slowed down my pace and, with a smile, walked home with her in the afterglow of the setting sun. Just like when I was a child. Looking at my grandmother's gray hair and her hunched back that couldn't straighten up, a sudden feeling of sadness slowly spread in my heart. During those many years when I was chasing after Emma, did my dearest grandmother also wander at the entrance of the village several times, waiting to see if the familiar figure she knew would get off the coach? I was raised by my grandmother. I don't have a deep relationship with my parents. I didn't even inform them when I got divorced and resigned from my job in City H and came back. So, on the 12th day after my return, when the neighbor next door came to my grandmother with a mobile phone and gave me a rather complicated look, I immediately understood that it was a call from my parents. When my grandmother handed the phone to me, my mother was angrily shouting on the other end of the line. I hung up the phone expressionlessly. In less than a minute, the phone rang again. As soon as I said, "Hello," the shouting on the other end became even louder than before. I hung up the phone again. After doing this 4 or 5 times, my mother finally calmed down. She no longer shouted loudly but just asked me to give her my new phone number. She said that I didn't even tell her about such a big thing as the divorce and questioned what was going on in my mind. I pursed my lips and calmly told her, "I was thinking that it's been nearly 2 months since I got divorced, and this time you remembered me a little sooner than last time." There was a choke on the other end, and then there was no sound. When I was a child, our family's financial situation wasn't very good. After my parents gave birth to me, they decided to go out and make a living, leaving me in the care of my grandmother. After a few years, they did earn some money, but they also had a new child by their side. I got a younger brother. The reason for having a younger brother was that I wasn't close to them. Later, during the summer vacation, they tried to take me to live with them to cultivate our relationship. At that time, my younger brother was 6 years old, and I was 11. At that age, I already disdained competing with children for toys. However, my younger brother, whom I had only met a few times in total, was full of hostility towards me. I casually put the Ultraman toys that he had carelessly thrown on the sofa on the table. When my parents came back from work, some of those Ultraman toys somehow had missing arms or legs. My younger brother held the incomplete Ultraman toys, pursed his lips, and cried silently. He knew that our parents doted on him. Sure enough, my parents gave me a very complicated look. I tried hard to explain that I didn't do it. I still remember the helplessness at that moment. My mother waved her hand and said perfunctorily, okay, I know you didn't do it." Then, she turned around and said to my father in a place where she thought I couldn't hear, "How did your mother teach this child to be like this?" My father didn't say anything, obviously also acquiescing that I was the one who did it. Later, they bought more toys, but those toys were locked in a storage room, and only the 3 of them had the keys to that room. I'm a bit allergic to seafood, and my grandmother remembers this most clearly. There has never been any seafood on our family's dining table. Before I was brought to my parents' place, my grandmother also told my mother not to let me touch seafood. My mother nodded and agreed. But on the 3rd day after I arrived at their home, I ended up in the hospital because of a bowl of seafood porridge. When I could barely breathe in the emergency room, I heard the noisy quarreling of my parents just on the other side of the door. My mother said, "How was I supposed to know he's allergic to seafood?" My father's voice was filled with helplessness. "Didn't Mom tell you when she came?" I can't remember so many things she said. My mother's voice was a bit sharp. "Besides, he's already so old. He should know what he can and can't eat himself. I think he's just greedy. Since his younger brother wanted to eat it, if he didn't eat it, he'd feel like he was at a disadvantage." Now, the reason they're so angry is probably not that I didn't tell them about my divorce from Emma, but that I resigned from my high-paying and stable job. They're afraid that without a job, I'll compete with my younger brother for the family property. Otherwise, why would they remember to call me? Probably considering this matter was of great importance, my parents actually rushed back that same night. Following them was my younger brother who was in college. When our eyes met, the glee in his eyes hadn't even had time to fade away. After not seeing each other for more than 2 years, my parents looked much older. The wrinkles at the corners of their eyes were clearly visible even when they weren't smiling, and the nasolabial folds had deepened a lot. Especially my mother's expression seemed rather mean. My mother ignored my grandmother's cheerful greetings and gave me a cold glance. Before she even had a chance to sit down, she angrily shouted, "James, you've grown up and become independent, haven't you? You didn't even discuss such big things as getting a divorce and resigning from your job with us?" My grandmother was shocked by this news. She looked at her and then at me. Her lips moved a few times, but she didn't say anything in the end. I knew that our family affection was thin, and I felt no ripples in my heart. I just looked at the cigarette that was half burned between my fingers and remained silent. My mother couldn't stand my appearance the most. Her voice suddenly became sharp. "James, is this the way you treat your own mother? You're completely lacking in manners. No wonder your marriage failed. Seeing that she was saying more and more outrageous things, my father suddenly reached out and tugged at her. He clicked his tongue and looked dissatisfied. You're really out of your mind. How can you talk to the child like this? My mother realized she had said the wrong thing but was too proud to apologize to me. She snorted coldly and turned her face away. My father also looked at me with some embarrassment, as if expecting me to apologize to my mother. I'm the one who was scolded, and I'm supposed to apologize? Why? Are children born owing their parents something? My grandmother brought tea and softly said to my parents, you should talk to the child nicely about things. My mother gave her a somewhat disdainful look. What do you know? I think James has become so bold because you've spoiled him. She's always been used to taking my grandmother as a punching bag, and for the sake of family harmony, my grandmother has always silently endured it. I threw the cigarette butt in my hand on the ground and crushed it with my toe before turning to look at my father. I asked him, how did you know I was back? My father smiled awkwardly. Emma called your mother and me, saying that she hadn't been able to get in touch with you for a while, and she was a bit worried. I pursed my lips and suddenly felt it was ridiculous. She was the one who had an affair, the one who was carrying someone else's child, the one who first proposed the divorce, and the one who said our relationship had come to an end and we should part on good terms. I'm not going to pester her. Since we're divorced and there's no longer any connection between us, I'm determined to break off all ties with her completely. But why is she still trying to contact me? My mother was still chattering on about how good Emma was. Every time she praised Emma, she would also imply that my personality was terrible and that it was already good enough that Emma was willing to tolerate me, and so on. I listened expressionlessly as she used me as a contrast to Emma and belittled me. When she had dug up almost all my past mistakes and finally came to the conclusion that I was not in my right mind, she said that getting a divorce was one thing, but how could I give up my job just because of the divorce? Yes, if I were in my right mind, I wouldn't be here listening to her babble on so much. Deep down, I probably still had an unattainable wish. No matter how my mother spoke harshly to me, I'm divorced from Emma, and I've resigned from my job. There's no room for regret. On the day when I stood in the cold wind all night and didn't receive even a word of comfort, I suddenly realized that the rest of my life is still long, so why waste it on someone who doesn't love me? In the end, my mother was still unwilling to give up. She said that since the gap between my resignations wasn't long, should seize the opportunity and find a new job. My father also agreed with this proposal. He joined my mother in persuading me to find a job as soon as possible and said that the major I studied wasn't a good fit for our family business. In order to prevent me from competing with my younger brother for the family property, they really showed an ugly side. I pressed my slightly aching forehead and interrupted their discussion. Have you said enough? My parents both turned to look at me at the same time, and even my younger brother, who had been watching the drama beside us, looked at me in surprise. Over the years, I've always had a good temper, and I've never done anything to disobey or talk back to my parents. That's why my mother has been able to belittle me so recklessly. But now, I suddenly don't want to endure it anymore. I didn't bother to beat around the bush and said indifferently, if you've said enough, then leave. You can still buy tickets for the return journey. My mother stared at me with wide eyes. It took her a long time to point at my nose and start cursing again. She called me an ungrateful wretch who couldn't be tamed, and said I was cold-hearted by nature. I glanced at her, stood up, and walked out. Being cold-hearted can be hereditary. And my cold-hearted nature was inherited from them. I can't blame anyone else for that. I found a hotel in the town and checked in. Just as I settled down, Emma called. I don't know where she got my new phone number. I looked at the 11 digits that I had memorized so well. After a moment of hesitation, I still didn't answer. Emma wasn't discouraged. She quickly made a second call, then a third one. After the divorce, her patience with me was noticeably better than before. But did she really have to act like this? When she called for the 7th time, I answered the phone. There was no sound on the other end, only Emma's steady breathing. I didn't say anything either. I lowered my eyes and watched the call time keep changing. When it showed a number starting with 2, I broke the silence. Our relationship has come to an end, and we should part on good terms. Those were your words. I don't have the habit of staying on bad terms with my ex-wife. Emma, no matter what it is, don't come to me again. There was still silence on the other side. I didn't expect an answer from Emma. After hanging up the phone, I added her to the blacklist without hesitation. When we were still married, Emma wasn't particularly good to me. Now that we're divorced, she's been contacting me quite often. What's the matter? Is she not used to suddenly losing me, the one who used to fawn over her? It's possible. After all, I took care of her meticulously for 5 years. I understand my parents. After going through tough times, they really don't want to go back to that kind of life. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been so distant from them. Since someone has to be in charge of the family business, they can only stay here for at most 2 or 3 days this time. I really don't want to see them, and the only way is not to go back. I turned off my phone and stayed in the hotel in the town for 7 days. On the evening of the 7th day, my grandmother, leaning on her old and worn-out crutch, staggered and found me. This old woman in her 80s took small steps and searched all the way from the village to the town. I can even imagine how she asked around and came here. My grandmother's gray hair was illuminated with an orange glow by the setting sun. Her mouth, with only a few teeth left, was smiling at me. She said, "James, they've left. Grandma is here to take you home." I suddenly remembered that when I was a teenager, no matter how late I was after evening self-study, she would always wait for me at the entrance of the village. I thought that after going through so much, I should have passed the age of crying easily. But at that moment, looking at my grandmother's figure, who was almost 2 heads shorter than me because of her hunched back, I couldn't help but feel my eyes welling up. After I went back with my grandmother, I turned on my phone. As expected, my parents had sent me many long messages on WeChat, scolding me for being unreasonable between the lines. I didn't even bother to open and read them. Emma also sent a message from a strange phone number. The general meaning was that she hoped I would live a good life. This time, she just wanted to make sure I was safe. After all, we had been husband and wife. She said she wouldn't look for me again in the future, and we should each live well. Each live well? To be honest, I certainly don't want the person who betrayed the marriage to live a good life. I can't bring myself to wish her well. However, the 7-digit balance in my bank card gave me enough confidence. I want to see the vast mountains and rivers, the mountains, rivers, and lakes, and also the sunrise and sunset. 3 months into the trip with my grandmother, I met a senior from my high school in a foreign place. I vaguely remember that she had excellent grades back then. She was not only beautiful but also had a curvy figure. At that age when young boys were full of romantic thoughts, she was the goddess of most of the boys in our dormitory. I only heard that she had a somewhat dull personality, had few friends around her, and didn't like to get too close to others. I had almost no contact with her in high school. I just knew that there was such a person. Later, we were admitted to the same university and inevitably met a few times, but we were just nodding acquaintances. The senior was carrying a camera and a simple backpack, traveling alone. Unlike her previous sickly pale complexion, now her skin was a healthy wheat color. Her fully developed figure was so exquisite that even the loose sportswear couldn't hide it. Unlike Emma's aggressive beauty, her beauty was very approachable. It was so gentle that it made people couldn't help but indulge in it. Meeting an old acquaintance in a foreign place, and since the next destination we were going to was the same, we simply decided to travel together. The senior didn't talk much. She was respectful to the elderly and cared for the young, could read people's expressions, and was good at making the elderly happy. My grandmother liked her very much. At night, my grandmother and I sat on a deck chair together and looked at the stars outside through the skylight. My grandmother suddenly said, "That girl Sophia is really nice." I immediately understood what my grandmother meant, so I forced a couple of dry laughs. Yes, she is nice. In matters of love, the thoughts of the elderly are always particularly sensitive. But between the senior and me, although we have the same interests and aspirations, there is still an insurmountable gap. I admire her, but it doesn't mean I like her. Moreover, I've been divorced, and there's no way I'm worthy of her. My grandmother is getting old. Every time we arrive at a place, she always needs to rest for 2 days to recover. Because of this, I was worried that it would delay the senior's itinerary, and I always wanted her to go ahead. The senior didn't refuse my suggestion. She just smiled and said, "It's not too late to part ways at the next stop. I also want to stay here for a few more days." In the misty rain of Jiangnan, the scenery of the ancient town is as beautiful as a painting. In such a beautiful scenery, my mood brightened a lot, and I couldn't help but take a few more glances at the senior. I've long known that she looks different from Emma's flamboyant appearance. The senior is beautiful and charming, with very soft facial features. There is a scholarly air about her, and at first glance, You can tell that she is easy to get along with." Sensing my gaze, the senior smiled gently. The rolling mountains in the distance were reflected in her half-curved black eyes, giving people a feeling of being open-minded. The paths in the ancient town wind and turn. The continuous drizzle stirred up a few layers of thin white mist, and the scene was like a fairyland. I told my grandmother that I wanted to go out for a walk. My grandmother said that she was too old and didn't want to walk too much. She sat under the same eaves with the old ladies of her age in the town. They spoke in a difficult-to-understand dialect version of Mandarin to each other. I don't know if they could understand each other. When they got excited, they couldn't help but laugh first, and then they all burst into laughter together. I stood not far away and watched for a while. The sound of footsteps behind me got closer and closer. I turned my head to look. In the hazy misty rain, the senior walked towards me slowly, holding an oil paper umbrella with a jade handle. She stood beside me, her movements gentle as water, in a way I had never seen before. The senior asked me if I wanted to go out for a walk together. It was exactly what I wanted. I took the oil paper umbrella from her hand and tilted it slightly towards her. She was almost a head shorter than me, but she didn't walk any slower than me. We walked around the ancient town with its blue bricks and green tiles together. The senior didn't talk much. Many of the conversation topics were initiated by me. She listened very carefully and answered my questions very seriously, as if she was trying her best to find a standard answer. It was quite interesting. Looking at her delicate and beautiful profile, there was a hint of imperceptible regret in my heart. It's a pity. I've already passed the age of being easily attracted. The senior and I went our separate ways at the next stop. After that, I crossed 3 more mountains and walked through 2 lakes, but I never saw her again. My grandmother and I left in the early winter and came back at the end of summer. There were many more smiles on my grandmother's face. She would go out chatting with others while leaning on her crutch, and whenever she met someone, she would talk about the vast mountains and rivers she had seen during this period. There were several old people in the village of the same age as my grandmother. Even though my grandmother's descriptions were lacking in vocabulary, they all showed expressions of longing and envy. There were also some people who couldn't stand seeing my grandmother happy. After meals, they would always ask me about my marriage or work in a veiled way. The smile on my grandmother's face froze. After a long time, she let out a sigh. "We can't control the affairs of young people," she said, waving her hand. The old woman who started the topic gave a meaningful look, and the topic finally came to an end. After resting at home for a few days, I began to have new plans for my life. My parents' worries were completely unnecessary. I'm not interested in the family business. I'm already tired of the invisible battles in the business world. I want to calm down and cultivate my mind and body. I majored in civil engineering at university. I didn't study my major courses very well, but I attended a lot of agricultural courses. In a small town in the countryside, there is plenty of land. I contracted a few mu of land and planned to grow some flowers and sell them. In recent years, many people have placed great emphasis on festivals, and the sales of flowers have been rather brisk. Moreover, I also want to calm down and cultivate my mind and character. Probably there is no better way than growing grass and flowers. In the following days, Luna contacted me several times using her friend's WeChat. Between the lines, she was trying to test whether I had truly forgotten her cousin. I once loved so deeply, and leaving so freely seemed to them just a strategy of retreating in order to advance. I wasted a lot of time and even more effort on Emma. The price of leaving was sacrificing so many years of my youth, and the cost was indeed quite high. During that period, the few mu of land I had contracted required the construction of plastic greenhouses. I didn't have the time or the intention to deal with Luna, and in the end, the matter just faded away. I'm not that tactless. At least I know how to stop losses in a timely manner. When the plastic greenhouse was about to be completed, an old acquaintance visited my home. She was sitting in the yard talking to my grandmother. Her back was slender, and the setting sun shone on her profile, making her look gentle and pretty. As if sensing something, the senior turned her eyes to look at me and gave me a faint smile. "I passed by here and thought I'd come to see you." My heart, which had been as silent as death for a long time, suddenly couldn't help but give a heavy thump, and then it returned to normal after a short while. The senior who said she came to see me, after settling in, never mentioned leaving again. Every morning after that, she would go out with me, carrying her camera and taking photos as she walked behind me. Sometimes I would walk a long way, and she would still be standing in the same place, so I would stop and wait for her. I knew she liked the scenery here so much that she was willing to stop and enjoy it. When we arrived at the flower field, she would show me the scenery she had taken and we would admire it together. The morning mist, the curling smoke from the kitchen chimneys, the crisscrossing farmland, the houses arranged in an orderly manner, and the houses hidden among the clear waters and green mountains. The scenery of the small town has a unique charm. Suddenly coming back to my senses, I realized that somehow we were standing so close to each other. We looked at each other and then quickly averted our eyes in a flustered manner. I saw a faint blush appear on the senior's cheeks. I finally belatedly realized that something was wrong. So, on the day when the flower seeds broke through the soil, I invited the senior to have a small drink in the wooden house in the flower field. When I was a bit tipsy, I told her all about my entanglements with Emma over the years. The senior was slightly stunned. As such a smart person, how could she not understand the underlying meaning of my words? After a moment, she let out a soft sigh. Under the dim yellow light, she looked at me intently. You don't have to say it. I already know. But she didn't want to say how she knew. After the fanatical love for Emma faded away, I didn't know if I still had the ability to love someone else. But I knew that it shouldn't be now. Perhaps I was overthinking it. The senior might not have any special feelings. The flowers planted at the end of summer sprouted new shoots in the early autumn and formed a small bud in the cold winter. The senior's camera recorded all their growth processes. She changed from a travel blogger who wanted to travel across the vast mountains and rivers to a gardening blogger and enjoyed it very much. Habit is a very scary thing, but I have to admit that after just a few months of getting along, I had actually gotten used to the senior's company. It was like the spring breeze and the gentle rain, nourishing everything silently. In a hurry, it was the new year again. On the day of the beginning of spring, the roses in the plastic greenhouse bloomed. The delicate and charming roses exuded a faint fragrance, which was rich and long-lasting. I picked one and held it in my hand to observe it carefully. The senior, who had just been taking photos of the roses, somehow came over. She leaned slightly forward to admire the rose in my hand with me. We were so close that the fragrance of Chinese honey locust surrounded my nostrils, which was refreshing and pleasant. Compared with her extremely beautiful appearance, even the delicate roses seemed to lose their luster. At this moment, I don't know what came over me, but I suddenly handed the rose in my hand to her. Senior, do you like roses? Do you like roses? Do you like me who gives you roses? The senior was stunned for a moment, lowered her eyes to look at the rose I was holding up, and then raised her eyes to look at me steadily. There seemed to be boundless affection in her dark almond-shaped eyes. After a long time, she took the rose from my hand, lowered her head and sniffed the fragrance of the rose gently, and then she smiled slowly. I like it. Like what? The rose or? Is it possible that it's me? I stared at her blankly, completely forgetting to ask. I only knew that at this moment, among the countless flowers, not even half of her gentle eyebrows and eyes were as beautiful. Boom! I heard the huge sound of the high wall in my heart collapsing. It's not that I can't love. After confirming my own feelings, at the end of March, I solemnly confessed my love to the senior. There was no trace of surprise on the senior's face. She even accepted my feelings without any hesitation. Our way of getting along didn't change because of the change in our relationship. After getting along for more than half a year, the senior was still as gentle in character as when we first met. My grandmother was even more delighted and loved the senior even more than me. After March, my flower field completely opened up both online and offline sales channels, and there were no more problems such as poor sales. My parents called me after they learned that I was growing flowers. Perhaps they realized that there was a high probability that I wouldn't compete with my younger brother for the family property anymore, so my mother's tone became much more peaceful. However, she was still secretly mocking me for being unpromising between the lines. In their eyes, what future could there be in growing grass and flowers? I don't know why my biological parents have such great malice towards me, so I simply stopped taking their words to heart. I said calmly, since you dislike me so much, just pretend you never gave birth to me in the future. My mother's chattering stopped abruptly. My father hurriedly took the phone and scolded me, saying that I was no longer young and should be more sensible. I smiled. Anyway, you already have a obedient and sensible son. One more of me is really redundant. My father let out a sigh and said that I should calm down and then hung up the phone. I took a deep breath of the air filled with the fragrance of flowers, turned around, and saw the senior running towards me with a bouquet of baby's breath in her hands. She handed the baby's breath to me, touched her nose, and asked me a bit nervously if I liked it. The senior is very sensitive. Even though I seemed calm, she keenly sensed my unhappiness. I lowered my eyes to look at the flowers and suddenly remembered the language of flowers of baby's breath, silently guarding and loving. I still remember that in the past, when I had conflicts and differences with my parents, Emma would always frown at me and even accuse me of having a stubborn and unpleasant temper. I bent down and hugged the senior. I felt her body stiffen obviously, and then she tightened the arm around my waist. We were so close that I could hear her heartbeat, beating faster and faster. I suddenly became greedy for this warmth. In the 6th year of being together, the senior and I had a daughter who was 3 years old and would be able to go to kindergarten in September. The senior is also from City H. Due to the issue of household registration, we both had to go back to City H this time. It had been 6 years since I divorced Emma. In these 6 years, I hadn't heard any news about her and hadn't been back to City H either. After all, the main business was important. After arriving in City H, the senior and I rushed to the local police station at the first time. She took our daughter to the station to deal with the household registration issue. During the waiting process, I had a craving for a cigarette. After saying hello to the senior, I walked out of the police station and found a quiet place to smoke. After taking a couple of puffs, I casually looked around, but my gaze stopped at the corner of a street intersection. I saw a familiar figure. After not seeing each other for 6 years, when we met again, I almost instinctively wanted to lift my feet and leave. The next second, Emma raised her head. After her gaze passed over me, she suddenly turned her head and looked back at me. We looked at each other from a distance. I took a deep drag on the cigarette in my hand and turned my face away expressionlessly. Emma and I had become the most familiar strangers, and there would be no more intersections between us in the future. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw that after being stunned for a moment, Emma suddenly strode towards me. I didn't want to have any involvement with her, so I extinguished the cigarette in my hand and turned to leave. But Emma called me from behind, "James." I frowned and finally stopped in my tracks. Emma strode towards me and stood still in front of me, staring at me intently for a long time. After a while, she stammered and asked me, "When did you come back?" Come back? I had no intention of chatting with her. The senior and our daughter were still waiting for me, so I just said indifferently, "Is there something wrong? If there's nothing wrong, don't block my way." I never expected that as soon as I asked this question, Emma's eyes actually welled up with tears. Emma had always been proud and rarely shed tears in front of me. But what did it have to do with me? I clicked my tongue impatiently and was about to open my mouth to tell her not to block my way. Unexpectedly, Emma suddenly said, "James, I regret it." This senseless sentence made me frown even more tightly. Emma's eyes became even redder, and she said that she regretted having an affair back then and betraying our marriage. I thought for a long while before I figured it out. Probably, seeing me alone now, she assumed that I still loved her as deeply as I did in the past. Even though she had an affair and divorced me, she thought I would keep waiting for her to come back. Emma was too confident. In her heart, my image as a love-struck fool couldn't possibly crumble. She would never have imagined that I was already married, and my child was even 3 years old. At that moment, I suddenly really wanted to see Emma's reaction after learning that I had gotten married and had a child. I didn't have to wait long. I heard the voices of the senior and my daughter, "James? Daddy?" Emma was taken aback and suddenly turned her head to look in the direction of the sound. She saw the senior, and perhaps she recognized the senior too, because her face turned deathly pale the moment she saw the senior. She looked at the senior and my daughter for a while, then turned to look at me in disbelief. Her lower lip trembled slightly, and she couldn't say a complete sentence. My daughter broke free from the senior's hand and ran towards me. I bent down and picked her up in my arms. She hugged my neck tightly, buried her little head on my shoulder, and kept calling me "Daddy" over and over again. I gently patted her back in an appeasing manner, and then looked at Emma. After not seeing each other for 6 years, she hadn't changed much. She was still tall, beautiful, and charming. The only difference was that she seemed much more mature. Unlike the cold goddess she used to be, 6 years later, she had an intellectual beauty. This kind of beauty came from within and revealed the wisdom and charm of the passage of time. When we met again, I didn't greet her politely by saying, "Long time no see," nor did I feel disgusted when seeing her. My love and resentment towards her had long since dissipated completely during the 6 years. Emma's gaze settled on my daughter and lingered there for a long time. Her expression was extremely complicated, and her half-lowered eyes covered all the surging emotions in the depths of her eyes. Somehow, I understood her complicated emotions. Probably, it was because the so-called backup lover she thought I was hadn't been waiting for her in the same place. What kind of mentality is that? After being apart for many years and meeting again, we had both formed new families. There were no more ripples left for the former lover who had been so intimate with me. After a moment of silence, I asked her without any mercy, "What? Is your marriage not happy?" Serves her right. This is the retribution that all those who have affairs deserve. Before Emma could answer, the senior came over. Even her voice when greeting Emma was very gentle. "So you're my junior. Long time no see." Emma's hand hanging by her side slowly clenched into a fist, and she forced a smile at the senior that looked uglier than a cry. My daughter lay on my shoulder and softly called, "Mommy." The senior stroked her little head with an extremely doting smile. I don't know why, but a feeling of pleasure welled up in my heart for no reason. I took the senior's hand and said to Emma, "This is my wife." Emma lowered her gaze and looked at the hands that the senior and I had interlocked. There seemed to be a mass of impenetrable darkness in her eyes. The senior coaxed my daughter for a while and then looked at me. She gently shook our clasped hands and asked me softly, "Shall we go?" I nodded. Just as we turned around and walked a few steps, we met another acquaintance head-on, William. I still remember that he had excellent grades when we were studying, and he was Emma's biggest rival during her student days. What impressed me deeply was that they disliked each other because of some competitions. At school, apart from participating in competitions together, he and Emma didn't seem to have any other interactions. Even when they met face to face, they would turn away in disgust and not look at each other. When William saw me, he was obviously taken aback too. Then he pursed his lips awkwardly and avoided my gaze, looking to his right. He was holding the hand of a boy who was about 6 or 7 years old. When the boy saw Emma, he broke free from his hand and ran towards Emma, shouting, "Mommy." "Oh, I see." In that instant, what else was there that I couldn't understand? I turned back and looked at Emma. Emma bit her lower lip and turned her head away, not daring to meet my gaze. The senior tightened her grip on my hand. I turned back as if nothing had happened and gave her a reassuring smile, and continued walking with her. When we passed by William, I heard his voice, "James, congratulations." I was taken aback, and then sneered, "I should thank you for making it happen." What right does the mistress who once interfered in my marriage have to put on a false show of affection in front of me? Those who have left me can no longer be retained. After returning from City H, the life of our family of 3 returned to being plain, fulfilling, and filled with sweetness. The senior and I tacitly didn't mention Emma. One day half a month later, when I was trimming the flower branches, I looked up and saw the senior holding our daughter, looking out the window with a solemn expression. The senior has always been gentle. After getting along for so many years, this was the first time I saw such an expression on her face. Subconsciously, I followed her gaze and saw a familiar figure standing outside the window at some point. Emma was standing in the yard talking to my grandmother, but her eyes kept looking towards the window. No wonder the senior's face was so gloomy. But what was Emma doing here all of a sudden? After calming our daughter down, the senior turned to look at me and left a sentence, "Don't go out." Then she opened the door and walked out. Through the window, I saw her talking to Emma. The 2 women of similar age exuded different temperaments, each with their own merits. I looked past Emma and at the senior. Once my gaze landed on her, I couldn't move it away. In my impression, the senior has always been gentle and considerate. The senior who was so confrontational and full of hostility like this was someone I had never seen before. I looked at her for a while, and without even realizing it, the corners of my mouth turned up. When the senior pushed the door and came in, the smile on my face hadn't had time to fade away. She was obviously taken aback, and her bright black eyes became even deeper. She asked me with an unclear meaning, "Are you so happy?" Realizing that she had misunderstood my meaning, I explained calmly, "Well, I've never seen you show so much hostility towards anyone before." Upon hearing this, the senior's expression softened a bit. She picked up our daughter who was playing with building blocks and leaned against my shoulder through our daughter. I heard her voice with a hint of helplessness in my ear, "Go out and make things clear with her." After a pause, she added in a low voice, "Don't be stupid." I stood under the grapevine in the yard, facing Emma. In just half a month since I last saw her, she looked much more haggard. Perhaps she came in a hurry, and there were several wrinkles on her clothes. This wasn't the neat and tidy Emma I remembered. She just looked at me quietly without saying a word, and the air was silent and oppressive. My grandmother probably couldn't stand this atmosphere. She stood up leaning on her crutch and said that it was a bit stuffy in the yard and she wanted to go out for a walk. After my grandmother walked away, I was the first to break the silence and asked, "Emma, even though so many years have passed, I've always had a question I wanted to ask you." There seemed to be a glimmer of hope in Emma's lifeless eyes. I guessed that she probably thought I was going to ask her if she had ever loved me. So shallow. Emma cleared her throat, and when she spoke, her voice was still hoarse and hard to hide. "Go ahead." I saw the slender figure by the window raise the corners of her mouth. I took a step closer and asked in a low voice, "Do you think the stolen pleasure tastes good?" Emma stood there in a daze, and the expression on her face cracked inch by inch. Her delicate makeup couldn't hide the shock and bewilderment in her expression. A feeling of pleasure welled up in my heart. I saw that the knuckles of Emma's hand gripping the vine rack turned bluish-white. "I'm sorry." She finally said the apology that was 6 years late, and then added, I thought. She couldn't say the rest of the words. What did she think? Did she think that I loved her so deeply that even after the divorce, I would still be silently guarding her in a place she didn't know? But Emma, no one in this world is born owing someone else. You're already past the age of 30. Why still don't you understand? I remained silent and looked at her coldly. We separated and went our own ways, each finding our own happiness. No matter what her mentality was, emotionally and rationally, she shouldn't have come looking for me. But in the 6th year after the divorce, she just had to come to me. Emma looked at me. There were red blood vessels in her eyes. In the end, she left a sentence, "James, you probably won't believe it, but after divorcing you, I really did regret it." I was taken aback, and then smiled slowly. So what? No one knows better than me that Emma isn't truly regretful. She just feels uncomfortable because she saw that I'm doing pretty well after leaving her, even happier than when I was with her. In other words, even if Emma really does regret it, so what? Why does she have the nerve to come to me and say she regrets it after putting an extremely humiliating green hat on me and several years have passed? Don't talk to me about a prodigal son returning to the fold. The thing I despise the most in my life is a prodigal son returning. After not seeing each other for 6 years, Emma can still say such things to me, relying on nothing more than the unique preference I once had for her. I once loved her with all my heart, and she didn't believe that I could let go of her so easily. And when she truly realizes that she has lost me, it is inevitable that she can't accept it in her heart. Perhaps the years of farming and growing flowers have tempered my temperament. After all, I am more open-minded than her and have no intention of talking to her more. In my words, I just urged her to leave as soon as possible. She already has a new family. Coming all the way here to find me is a sign of infidelity to her new family. She betrayed me back then. Is she going to betray her family again now? Emma left my house but didn't leave this small town. She found a hotel in the town and stayed there. Every morning, she would stand from a distance and look in the direction of my place. The senior's face grew gloomier day by day, but she tried her best not to show her emotions in front of me and our daughter. Finally, one day, in the middle of the night while I was sound asleep, the senior quietly dressed and went out. After she left, I got up and secretly followed her. As expected, the senior had an appointment with Emma. I squatted under the window and eavesdropped on their conversation. After a moment of silence, Emma spoke first. "Before coming here, William had told me everything. My reunion with him is inseparable from you." I was startled, but quickly composed myself. Oh, so this was the very thing that made Emma break down. The senior remained silent. Then I heard Emma say through gritted teeth, "What a brilliant move." There was another moment of silence. I quietly stood up and peeked into the room through the gap left by the window. So what? The senior stood in the shadow of the incandescent lamp. From my angle, I couldn't see her expression clearly, and I only heard her voice without a trace of emotion. "Wasn't it you who was the first to be despicable?" Emma's body suddenly stiffened. "You know all about it?" "Of course I know," the senior sneered, her voice full of sarcasm. "I started liking James when I was 18, and I liked him even more when I was 28. Now, at 32, my love for him has only increased. But you are different. You have an unruly gene in your bones. If there hadn't been William back then, there would have been someone else in the future. James was in a difficult situation when he was with you. He saved me back then, so naturally I had to save him too. What if James finds out? There seemed to be a hint of expectation in Emma's voice. If James knows that you once schemed against his marriage, can you guarantee that he won't have any misgivings in his heart? For a moment, the senior stepped out of the shadow of the darkness, and the expression on her face was obscure. I heard her say, "I was saving him. How can it be considered scheming?" The next day, when I saw Emma again, I walked towards her. Before she could speak, I came straight to the point. "I heard everything you said last night." A glimmer of hope flashed in Emma's eyes. She pursed her lips, and her voice was a bit dry. "James, there was nothing between me and William before. Everything was." I interrupted her coldly. "Our marriage wasn't happy before. You never cared about me. Your parents, including your cousin, all thought that I was climbing above my station by marrying you. They never accepted me, and you never said a word in my defense. 6 years after the divorce, you and I have each formed a new family. You suddenly came all the way to find me. Are you worthy of—" I stopped, sneered. "Emma, after all, we were husband and wife. Let's call it a day." The last glimmer of light in Emma's eyes completely went out. "Our relationship has come to an end, and we should part on good terms." I returned the words Emma had said to her, unchanged. In the distance, the senior was holding our daughter and waving at me in the morning light. I raised the corners of my lips and strode past Emma towards them. Our daughter was in the middle. The senior and I looked at each other and smiled spontaneously. We held our daughter's little hands on each side and slowly walked towards the depths of the flower field. The sun was still shining brightly, and all the days were still wonderful. The unhappiness of a marriage is not the end but the beginning of moving towards happiness at the next stop. As human beings, we will always encounter all kinds of difficulties and obstacles. You just need to stick to your original intention. There will be someone willing to cross through layers of fog and run towards you. Extra chapter. Emma. The blinding sunlight shone through the window onto my eyes. I groggily opened my eyes. The sudden cold made my head ache terribly. Moreover, the mobile phone beside my pillow was ringing tactlessly. The 2 words, "William," kept flashing on the screen. A wave of annoyance welled up in my heart, and I threw the phone out and it hit the wall. It broke into pieces. The world fell silent. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Even though my head was splitting with pain, the words James had said to me yesterday kept echoing in my ears over and over again, each word clearly distancing himself from me. These were clearly the words I had once said, but when he returned them to me, I realized that they were truly heart-piercing. 6 years after the divorce, we each have our own family and shouldn't disturb each other. But I couldn't help it. I remember all the good things he once did for me. At that time, he was so good to me that I could hardly live without him. The change in our relationship was because of his first business trip. And at that critical moment, I met William, the moonlight of my youth. It's hard to imagine that after graduating for many years, the moonlight of my youth shone on me precisely. It was hard for me to refuse, even though I knew that doing so was sorry to James. After all, I betrayed the marriage. My mother was right. At that time, I had had enough of the good life. After the divorce, I once had the idea of going to find him, but I never took any action in the end. No one knows better than me that James liked me, really liked me a lot. The one who is liked always feels secure in that love. So what if I made a mistake first? I still felt secure. Until I saw James again 6 years later and saw Sophia standing beside him. No one knows my once shameful thoughts, and no one will know that it was precisely because I knew Sophia's feelings for James that I, coincidentally, appeared beside James first. Sophia has really good judgment in people. James is a very good partner. I just can't figure it out. As proud as Sophia is, why would she marry a divorced man? Second, the year I met Sophia, she still had the surname Ling, taking her father's surname. Sophia is not only beautiful but also has excellent grades. She is gentle and polite to others. She is only 1 year older than me, but she is the perfect child in other families in the mouths of most parents in that area, including my parents. At first, my impression of Sophia was just that of a neighbor girl. Unlike other friends, I didn't like her, but I didn't dislike her either. Until one day, my father looked at me, all dirty after a day of playing, and shook his head and sighed. I still clearly remember the words he said, "I wish you could be as sensible as Sophia." This was the first time I heard my serious and rigid father praise someone, and that person wasn't me. The emotion of jealousy quietly grew without my awareness, and when my mother enviously praised Sophia's mother for Sophia's excellent grades and my cousin said to Sophia, "Sister Sophia, you're so nice, even better than my cousin," the emotion of jealousy spread infinitely. I began to pay subtle attention to Sophia's every move, and only then did I find that her life was very simple. Besides studying, she was growing flowers and raising cats. She liked to sit under the tree in the garden and read books. Her upper body was hidden in the shade of the tree, and her long legs were bathed in the sunlight. That chubby orange cat lay in her arms, lazily squinting its eyes and sleeping. Sunlight, flowers, a young girl, a chubby orange cat, and under the shade of the tree. It looked wonderful no matter how you looked at it. Such a quiet and well-behaved young girl. No wonder she was deeply loved by the elders. I restrained my naughty nature and began to learn from Sophia intentionally or unintentionally, imitating her temperament and even her way of dressing. Even I knew that I was like a counterfeit. I hated myself like this, yet I couldn't help but continue to imitate. Because even my parents began to praise my changes. Until I was 16 years old, and Sophia was 17 that year. On the way back from school, Sophia was blocked in an alley. Sophia was really too excellent, so excellent that she was hated. It was a completely humiliating form of bullying. It was the first time Sophia had encountered such a situation, and she was so panicked that her voice for help was out of tune. It was just after the evening self-study and there were many classmates passing by the entrance of the alley, but no one was willing to stop. I did stop, but I didn't dare to go and help. Until a tall and thin teenager heard the sound and stopped at the entrance of the alley. He leaned forward and peeked into the alley. After seeing the situation clearly, he picked up a wooden stick from the wall and rushed in without saying a word. 2 fists can't defeat 4 hands. Naturally, the teenager didn't fare well when he rushed in alone. He was badly beaten, but he also successfully rescued Sophia. I heard his voice, distorted with pain but still threatening, at the entrance of the alley. "If I see you bullying her again, I'll kill you." The teenager and Sophia supported each other and walked out of the alley. At that moment, I hid behind a tree. Because of my standing by and doing nothing, I suddenly felt that I would never have the face to face Sophia again in the future. 3. Later, I saw a portrait of that teenager in Sophia's studio. It was a painting of his back, and at the edge of the painting was the teenager's name, James. Maybe I know Sophia better than she knows herself. Just from this painting, I guessed Sophia's little thoughts. A young girl always has a hero complex. The teenager who stood up that night was undoubtedly a hero in Sophia's eyes. But Sophia didn't deliberately get close to James. She just occasionally handed a bottle of mineral water to the sweating James after he finished playing basketball. James took the mineral water from Sophia's hand and thanked her with a smile. The teenager at the age of 16 or 17 had a handsome face and clear eyes that you could see straight through. But the look in his eyes when he looked at Sophia was full of unfamiliarity. He didn't know Sophia, didn't know the little girl he had rescued that night. Also, Sophia had always been proud. Naturally, she didn't want the person she liked to see her in a sorry state. After James left, Sophia stared at his back for a while. Her eyes blinked quickly twice, and the corners of her mouth turned up slightly. I knew that was how she showed her liking for someone. After all those years, it was the first time I saw Sophia interested in the opposite sex. If I snatched the person Sophia liked, the despicable feeling welled up in my heart uncontrollably and became out of control. Getting together with James was smoother than I had imagined. During that time, I saw Sophia's disappointed eyes more than once. But Sophia was just Sophia. Her pride all over her body prevented her from doing the thing of snatching someone from others. This made me even more determined to stay with James. Finally, in the year Sophia turned 18, Ling's father's illegitimate son who had been living outside came to the door. Sophia's mother had a very strong temperament. How could she tolerate such an insult? But her good upbringing also prevented her from doing something like cursing in the street. Sophia's mother took Sophia and left the Sophia family. I finally didn't have to live under her shadow anymore. For some reason, I didn't break up with James. He was really nice and had a good personality. He was much more interesting than I had imagined. In the 17 or 18 years of my life, he was the first boy I had ever gotten close to. I could no longer tell whether my feelings for him were genuine or just out of the competitive spirit I had at the beginning. Almost naturally, we got the marriage certificate after graduating. 4. In the beginning, I really had the intention of spending my whole life with James. I don't want to think about why I changed later. After all, I was in the wrong. After the divorce, men and women should get married and live their own lives without interfering with each other. So, why did I chase here? Perhaps, as James said, even after the divorce, I didn't want to see him with another woman, especially since that person was Sophia, whom I had deliberately avoided. The day before I was going to leave, William and my cousin suddenly came to find me together. They didn't find me but naturally found James instead. My cousin was used to being overbearing in front of James. When I arrived, she was insulting James. Every word was mocking him for being unseemly and shamelessly interfering in other people's families after the divorce. There was no change in James's expression. He glanced indifferently at my cousin and William and sneered, "The dog chains at home can't hold you back anymore. What are you barking about at someone else's door?" My cousin's face turned extremely ugly. Before she could speak, James suddenly smiled and looked at William. "So you're the mistress back then? Have you gotten used to the status of being promoted from a mistress to a legitimate partner these years?" William's face looked extremely unpleasant. Only then did James seem to notice me standing behind them. He sighed, as if he thought it was meaningless to argue with them. He said to William, "There is always a cycle of cause and effect in this world, and it never fails. William, whether you believe it or not, the pain I endured back then, you will surely experience 10 times more in the future." William had his back to me, and I couldn't see his expression clearly. I could only see the bulging blue veins on the back of his hand. He had wronged James first, and no matter what James said, he had no power to refute. Finally, James waved his hand and gave the order to send them away. "Emma, take them away from here. I don't want to see you guys for the rest of my life." After saying that, he held Sophia's hand and disappeared into the sea of colorful flowers. I looked at their backs as they walked further and further away, and my heart was filled with an unbearable sourness. William walked towards me with a sullen face. He probably wanted to take out on me the anger he had received from James. "What? Are you still enjoying yourself here and don't want to leave?" I glanced at him and thought of his deliberate appearance during my marriage with James. My despicable thought of snatching someone probably had been confessed to Sophia by him in detail. The feeling of disgust lingered in my heart, and I turned around and left. For the sake of that competitive spirit at the beginning, I lost the teenager who accompanied me through my whole youth. I have ultimately lost the person who loved me the most in my life. From then on, I will forever lose the one who loved me the most.